morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for being in attendance today. I do want to take this opportunity really to thank the media, because this is an opportunity for us not to tout successes in bringing prosecutions, but really to educate and inform the public of the problem and that there are resources and folks who are on the case, on the job, investigating and bringing actions against those who would abuse our most vulnerable neighbors. So I want to thank you for covering this very important story. Let me thank AARP for graciously hosting us today, and just the wonderful work that you do. And Tammy Bresnahan, who's going to speak later, we know each other from years back. David Conway, the state president, and Hank Greenberg, who we also go way back, Hank, to our days protecting consumers in Annapolis. I want to thank my team on the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit, without whom certainly we in the Office of the Attorney General could not do our part, meet our assignment to protect our vulnerable neighbors and families and friends and those in need. Zach Shirley, you'll hear from. He's the chief of that division. Outstanding work done by a number of attorneys in that unit. Catherine Schuster-Pascal, who's here, as well as Kelly Casper, who's here as well, and Callie Smith. And that work can't be done unless we can investigate thoroughly. We've got investigators, Shannon Beatty and Mike Glenn. Mike might not be here as yet because he's en route, but I want to thank my team that is doing this work day in and day out. We're also joined today by a number of family members you'll hear from whose loved one was a victim of abuse and neglect. And that's Terry McCoy and her brother Derek Williams, who are here in the front, and Derek is joined by his wife Nanette. So we're grateful here to hear from you, to really kind of bring these aren't just numbers. They're real people, real faces, real tragedy and torment. And as I was saying to the family earlier, that they step up, they share their story to help sort of transfer that torment and tragedy that they experience into triumph for other families as we galvanize our resources, our efforts to make sure that we are reducing, if not eliminating, this type of activity. So for 45 years, the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit in the Office of the Attorney General has stood guard against the abuse and neglect of the state's most vulnerable adults. Today, we will highlight multiple recent cases that demonstrate the work of the unit and of my office's commitment to the elderly and disabled members of our communities. These cases are examples of our tireless effort to make our state a safe and secure place for all Marylanders to thrive regardless of their circumstances. The Office of the Attorney General believes that every person is entitled to basic dignity and respect and a recognition of their humanity. Where that dignity is violated, where the faith we place in those entrusted with the care and comfort of our most vulnerable is violated, we will be there to hold victimizers accountable. The first case highlights the use of social media and a recent update to the law related to vulnerable adults. In this case, a care provider in Anne Arundel County, in an assisted living facility, verbally and physically bullied two residents and posted videos of her actions on social media. The videos of the abuse were reposted multiple times. Because there was no physical injury, our office used a new addition to the law of vulnerable adult abuse that criminalizes an intentional and malicious infliction of severe emotional distress. Bullying the defenseless is reprehensible. Sharing videos of such acts on social media for others to watch and laugh at further victimizes the innocent. The next case involves a mother and daughter, Donna and Alicia Myers of Baltimore County, who assaulted a developmentally disabled woman in the care of Donna Myers. The assault involved pinning the victim to the ground, pulling her hair, kneeling on her chest, and throwing multiple punches. These events were witnessed by others who properly reported them. Both Donna and Alicia Myers have been convicted. We highlight this case to illustrate the importance of reporting concerns to my office. Without the watchful eye of the public my office would not have known of or been able to address this case. It's essential that anyone with concerns regarding the care and treatment of vulnerable adults report those concerns to the proper authorities. Finally, we have the case of Ms. Asia Williams, a care provider in Howard County, who was found guilty of second-degree abuse of a vulnerable adult and second-degree assault. Ms. Williams assaulted a developmentally disabled woman in the victim's own home while she was providing one-on-one care. The abuse was captured on video and showed the defendant dragging and kicking the victim until they disappear from view, at which point the audio corroborates that the assault continued. When the victim arrived at school the next day, she was found to have extensive bruising and missing patches of hair. This case drives home the importance of cameras in cases involving vulnerable adults, people who in many cases suffer from communication or memory issues that prevent them from advocating for themselves. Video is powerful evidence in any case. It's essential in these cases. Finally, I'll note that my office's commitment to the vulnerable population of Maryland does not stop with the cases you're hearing about today. This year, we are in Annapolis working with the General Assembly on proposed legislation to grant our office the power to enforce the Residents' Bill of Rights for individuals in long-term care and assisted living facilities by providing new tools to stop abuse and neglect in the state's nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Often it's a case where we can go in, we see that certain abuse is taking place or violations of a patient's Bill of Rights, and while we investigate and bring either criminal or civil charges, we today do not have the tools often to stop that conduct right now. So we are in the General Assembly asking for injunctive relief. We see harm, we see it now, we want to stop it now. And I'm very pleased that the legislation is moving in Annapolis, and we're cautiously confident and optimistic that it will pass. Operations like these must be held to the highest standards. Our bill would create a new and more effective legal route to stop residents who may be suffering in long-term care facilities. Operators who put profits over people will be dealt with in the same way as individual abusers. So I'd like to now introduce or bring to the podium Zach Shirley, who I mentioned is the chief of our Medicaid fraud and vulnerable victims unit. I want to thank you, Zach, and your team. Zach?
Thanks, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Zach Shirley. I'm the director of the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit. As the AG mentioned, we've been around for 45 years, since 1979. But up until last year, we were called the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. And we changed our name because we do so much work with vulnerable victims. This is a major focus of what we do every day. We thought that our name should reflect that because we wanted people to be aware that we were a resource, that when problems happen, you could reach out to us. So now we're the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit. We're part of a larger network. There are actually 53 Medicaid fraud control units around the United States. Every state has one. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, DC, all have a Medicaid fraud control unit. They are all charged with the same mission to stop the abuse and neglect of vulnerable adults. With me in the room today are a few people from the unit who worked on the cases you're going to hear about. They're actually all right here. Could you raise your hands? And Kathy as well, who's up here with me. These individuals' work on these cases was exemplary, and they're to be commended. And I tell them constantly that I'm honored and humbled to work with them. This mission is essential. It's important, and everyone in the unit is dedicated to it to a degree you can't even imagine. So, good work, guys. So today's cases, we're going to highlight three, and they're just three of many that we've handled, but I think these three deserve to be highlighted because they bring to the fore some key issues that we face in our daily operations. The first is the case of Janae Alston. This case came to our attention in January of 2022, actually from one of our investigators in the unit who was perusing Facebook and saw this video and was so troubled by it, she sent it to everyone else and said, look at this, we have to do something. So we picked it up, and it turned out that a lot of people had seen this video, including other stakeholders in the community like the Office of Healthcare Quality. So when we reached out to them trying to identify the location of this video, they knew, because they had also received a report directly from the facility, because another worker in the facility had seen the video and reported it to the administration. So now we knew where the video took place. We talked to the facility administrator, we identified the employee involved, and that's when we found out there was not one but two videos. We pulled the second video off of social media, and I will say this was everywhere. It was on Facebook, it was on Instagram, it was on Murder Inc., which is an Instagram account that focuses on crime in Baltimore. There were a lot of eyes on these videos. So we found out there's a second video, we watched that video, and we realized it's a different victim. It's the same care provider abusing both people. So we proceeded to investigate, we gathered the evidence, we gathered the records, we found out what happened, we interviewed people, we got the story, and we were ready to indict. But before we did, we invited Miss Alston to come in and talk to us. She said she would. She didn't show up. So we indicted her on 4 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult in the 2nd degree. We had a bit of a problem because in one of the videos, there's not a lot of physical contact. And you need that offensive touching to make a good abuse of a vulnerable adult charge. We didn't have that. What we did have was a woman standing over a woman in a wheelchair, threatening her, menacing her, bullying her, and goading her to fight. And this is when we realized that we had a new option. And that's because in 2021, the legislature had changed the definition of abuse of a vulnerable adult to include the intentional and malicious infliction of severe emotional distress. And while we didn't have physical contact, we surely had that. And so we indicted on 4 counts, 2 for each of the victims. And Ms. Alston was arrested on January 20th, 2023, and she pled to 2 counts of abuse, abuse of a vulnerable adult, 1 for each victim, and she was sentenced to 5 years to spend all but 3 months, but for each victim, and to be served consecutively. So in layman's terms, that's 10 years to spend all but 6 months. We're fortunate today to be joined by the family of the 2nd victim. And so at this point, I'm going to pause and ask Terry McCoy if she could come up and say a few words.
Hello, my name is Terry McCoy. My brother, Derek Williams, and his lovely wife, Nanette Williams, are here with me today. I live in Chesapeake, Virginia. It is where my mother, my brother, and our father were for 30 years. My husband and I drove up last night from Chesapeake to be here for this moment today. We want you to know who our mother really was, and we want to stress how much the work that you all are doing is so desperately needed. We are just one family, but there are countless others out there who need your help. Our 80-year-old mother, Lana Dean Rambo, was the 2nd victim of the case. I don't know how many thousands of strangers watched what happened to our mother in that video that was shared on social media. I don't know. Our family has not, we refuse to watch the video. We have not watched the video because it's just too disturbing for us. Here is what thousands of people don't know about the woman you watch being bullied, assaulted, and knocked to the ground. Our mother was one of the first Black women to ever work for the phone company in Norfolk, Virginia as a technician. She was so full of spirit. She was a social butterfly. She was loved and adored by her family and friends. Our mother was very caring, very compassionate. She loved to make crafts and she loved to sew. She won ribbons and awards at state fairs and for her quilts. She was also a gardener, and she absolutely loved to dance. She was just a beautiful, beautiful human being. When our mother first started showing signs of dementia, it was so difficult. It was so difficult for her and for all of us. We watched this strong, powerful, dynamic woman who loved life so much deteriorate before our eyes. And it was so challenging for all of us. She was our light. She was so independent and smart. Then dementia took hold. We worked so hard to find the right place to care for her. We searched in Chesapeake, but ultimately decided to move her here to Maryland, where my brother and my sister-in-law lived, so that they could be nearby her. We found a home that we thought was safe. Despite our preparations, our research, and all the careful steps we took, we never could have expected what would happen to her inside of that facility by an employee who was supposed to take care of her. It was the Office of the Attorney General who called. They called me and delivered the horrifying news of what had happened. It was bad. I could not believe it. I was yelling and screaming. I felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under my feet. It was the most powerful and painful thing that I have ever experienced in my life. After our mother was assaulted, bullied, and abused by the employee at the facility, who laughed throughout the whole video, our mother changed. We could all see it. She was on guard. It was like she lost trust in people. She was scared. I cannot explain to you how heartbreaking it was for all of us in the family. Our mother died just months after we learned that this despicable event had occurred. We buried her January the 21st, 2023. When vulnerable adults are abused, is disgusting. Just a moment. When the abuse is entertainment for social media, the world is twisted and ugly. It should have shocked people. It should have moved people to help. There should have been allowed nonstop calls to hold people like the woman who assaulted our mother responsible and accountable for their actions. To Attorney General Brown. I'm sorry, you're right behind me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And the men and women who work for you. Please keep doing what you're doing. Please keep protecting people like our mother. So many families need your help. Okay. We thank you for the actions you took in our case. And I ask everyone to please, please never forget our mother, Lana Dean Rambo. She deserves so much better than how she was treated by her caretaker when she was alive. Please keep her in your hearts as you continue to fight to protect the vulnerable from abusers. We thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Ms. McCoy, for your courage. It means a lot that you're here today. Case number 2 will highlight the importance of video in crimes involving vulnerable adults. As you can imagine, vulnerable adults are often unable to speak for themselves, either because they are nonverbal or because they have memory issues related to age, dementia, or developmental disability. So often what we find are vulnerable individuals who show up to their schools, their places of work, their day programs. They're covered in bruises and unexplained injuries. But if they can't tell us what's happening, it's often the end of the inquiry. Because the truth is, vulnerable victims are often alone with the people who are abusing them. And the vulnerable victims can't talk to us, and the abusers aren't going to tell us. Now, there's a solution here, and that solution is video. And in many cases, the facilities where these people live or work or go to their day programs have video cameras. And so that's often the first thing we check. Because if there's a video camera, it pulls back the shroud of secrecy, and now we know what happened. Frankly, my high school football coach used to say, "The big eye in the sky don't lie." This following case is just such a case. So in April 2023, the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit received a report of abuse through some mandatory reporting channels. And the report stated that a 21-year-old victim who was developmentally disabled had arrived at her school, complaining that her care provider had pulled her hair and dragged her down the stairs. She was sent to the school nurse, who discovered that she was covered in bruises and scratches. Her back, down her arms, her legs, and clumps of her hair were missing. The Howard County Police were summoned, and the victim was taken to the hospital. So what happened? We went to the video. It turned out that the victim's apartment had a security camera in the living room. And that security camera told us exactly how she wound up in that situation. Video from a camera in the victim's apartment revealed that the victim was left unsupervised by her care provider, Ms. Asia Williams. As the victim was wont to do, when unsupervised, she often left her apartment, and she did. And her care provider emerges a few moments later, looks around, realizes she's missing, and walks out the front door after her. A few minutes after that, the victim comes running back into the apartment, followed by Miss Asia Williams. It was very clear from the video, we're not going to show the video, it was very clear that the victim was terrified. She ran across the room, she sat on the couch, and sort of cowered away from her care provider. Williams then pulled the victim off the couch by her feet, pushed her to the floor, and kicked her in the buttocks through another door into her bedroom, because there was no camera in that bedroom. Something Miss Asia Williams was acutely aware of. The remaining abuse takes place off camera, but the camera still had audio, and we could still hear what happened. I'm not going to repeat the string of abuses that woman piled on someone she was supposed to be taking care of. But you can read it right there.
The last line, that's correct.
When she was finished, Miss Asia Williams came out of the room and looked directly at the security camera. She knew it was there. That's why she did what she did in the other room. What's more telling, though, is that the victim didn't come out of her bedroom in her own house for the rest of the day until shift change, when Asia Williams left and someone else came to care for our victim. She was afraid to come out of her bedroom in her own house. And I think that's important to underscore here. A lot of times, victims are being cared for in the one place they should feel safe, and that's at home. They have to trust the people who are coming into their homes to take care of them. The Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit began our investigation by conducting interviews with the people who discovered the victim's injuries. We reviewed the video, and we obtained hospital records that documented the injuries that I just discussed. With that evidence in hand, we indicted Asia Williams in Howard County on charges of abuse of a vulnerable adult in the second degree and assault in the second degree. On October 10th, Ms. Asia Williams was arrested, and she stood trial early last month in Howard County Circuit Court. At the conclusion of that trial, Judge William Tucker found Ms. Williams guilty on all charges, and she'll be sentenced on May 16th of this year and faces up to 15 years behind bars. The final case that we're going to talk about today occurred in Baltimore County, and I bring it to your attention because it highlights the importance of community involvement. In June of 2022, our unit received a report of an assault on a 30-year-old developmentally disabled woman by Donna Myers and her daughter, Alicia. The assault had taken place in Baltimore County in the parking lot of a day habilitation program. This is a place where developmentally disabled adults go to receive vocational training to help them get employment and work on basic life skills. But it happens during the day, and then the care providers would come and take the residents back to their homes. So Donna Myers is supposed to come and pick up our victim and take her back home. But the victims had a rough day. she's agitated. And while placing her in the car, she becomes resistant. She's upset, she's crying, she doesn't want to go, and she's fighting. I'll pause here to say that people who are charged with taking care of vulnerable adults are trained in the methodologies you use in this situation to calm someone down, reset them, and gently redirect them back into the car. But that's not what Donna did. Donna decided that instead she would pull the victim out of the car by her hair, kneel on her chest while her daughter knelt on her legs, and pin her to the ground. There were witnesses in the parking lot. There were other employees from this program. They intervened. They separated the three. They took the victim back inside. They calmed her down. Unfortunately, when they brought the victim back out to put her back in the car to take her home, she was again resistant, and she resisted being put into the car. And at this point, Donna's daughter, Alicia, says, "I'll handle it, Mom." And she pins the victim in the back of the car, and this was witnessed by multiple people, punches her in the upper torso and head 9 to 10 times full force. OAG investigators interviewed several witnesses. As I said, there were other people in the parking lot, there were other people involved. Their stories were remarkably consistent. So we indicted Donna Myers on 2 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult in the 2nd degree and assault in the 2nd degree. Alicia Myers was indicted on 1 count of assault because she wasn't actually the care provider at the time. And the statute for abuse of a vulnerable adult does require that the assailant be charged with the victim's care. So Alicia was just along for the ride. So when she did what she did, we could only charge assault. In October of 2023, Donna Myers pled guilty to abuse of a vulnerable adult in the 2nd degree and was sentenced to a 3-year suspended sentence. Alicia Myers was found guilty by a Baltimore County jury of 2nd degree assault and was sentenced to 10 years incarceration with all but 6 months suspended. The case of Donna and Alicia Myers demonstrates the important role the public plays in our cases. It was essential that people who saw something said something. This happened in a parking lot in Baltimore County. We would never have known. The eyes and ears of this unit are the public, and we have a variety of ways that the public can contact us with any concerns regarding abuse or neglect of vulnerable adults. We have a hotline phone number at 410-576-6521. You can contact us by email at medicaidfraud@oag.state.md.us. We also have an anonymous reporting portal located on our website, at the Maryland Attorney General's website. It's anonymous. You fill in whatever you're comfortable sharing and hit submit. It comes to our inbox, and we will run with it. If you want to call us and leave a voicemail, one of our esteemed investigators will call you back, and they will talk to you, and they will write a memo about what they find out, and we will run it down. But it's essential to our mission to protect the state's vulnerable adults that the public let us know. I know it seems trite because it's said over and over, but if you see something, say something. If you are concerned, there's a reason. We have instincts. Our gut tells us something's not right. Reach out to us. We will investigate. And to anyone responsible for the care of vulnerable adults, hear this. We are watching. We are on social media. We are talking to members of the public. We are talking to other stakeholders. We know what you're doing, and we will find you. Take heed that we take our mission very seriously, and we will hold abusers accountable. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Next up is Tammy Bresnahan. She's the AARP Senior Associate State Director for Advocacy.
Thank you.
Good morning. I think any of us can see all of our lives, our families in these scenarios, and it's heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. Really, it is heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. We are grateful that the Attorney General's office and the Attorney General successfully brought charges in these cases of mistreatment in facilities that care for Maryland's most vulnerable. Sadly, we know that these are not isolated cases. As a state, we must do more to regulate, monitor, and hold these facilities accountable for how they treat Maryland's most vulnerable. We will continue to work with the General Assembly, the Attorney General's office, and the Moore administration to make sure vulnerable adults can live with safety and dignity. As Maryland's population ages, many are going to have to seek care and assistance in a long-term care facility, such as assisted living or nursing home. Individuals enter these facilities with certain assurances from the state that they will be afforded certain fundamental rights, like the right to dignity, the right to be free from chemical restraints, and the right to receive adequate care. We know there's no magic bullet to reform long-term care systems overnight, but data can guide state lawmakers on smart policies, and they're getting the data from the Attorney General. Some emerging issues deserve more immediate attention, like the readiness of nursing homes dealing with during a natural disaster and workforce development, which you can tell is very much needed. In developing policies for individuals in long-term care settings, states should consider the 5 dimensions of long-term care: affordability and access, choice of setting and provider, support for family caregivers, community integration, and lastly but not leastly, safety and quality. What we know at ARP, that as long as these fundamental rights have been recognized, the Attorney General has and will continue to protect the rights of Marylanders by investigating and prosecuting these most serious cases of resident abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And the failure to provide a baseline level of care by providers cannot be tolerated. We want to make sure that the public knows that they have options for reporting. As Zach said, and the Attorney General, you can always call the Attorney General's office. He gave you that information. You can also call the Maryland Ombudsman, the Office of Healthcare Quality, and Adult Protective Services. Thank you, and be kind.
We'll open it up now if there are any questions.
Attorney General, Ken WB on radio. So I see 2 of them were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think there should be tougher penalties, prison time-wise, for people who commit this kind of crime?
Look, there's always a debate over, sentences. And, judges have the authority now to impose some fairly significant penalties for offenders. And I'm not going to comment on, whether judges are appropriately using those authorities or not. What we're focusing is on the investigations, the enforcement, the interaction with the public, as Zach emphasized over and over again, see something, say something. That's our responsibility. And when we are able to bring a defendant to court, or are able to get a plea agreement from that defendant, that is a step in the right direction in protecting vulnerable adults. The ability of that particular provider to be able to enter another setting where they would be able to offer care to a vulnerable adult drops off significantly. And in fact, quite frankly, they'll never be working in Maryland in that setting again. So there are penalties on the books. Judges have that discretion in terms of what they impose. Our focus is on the investigation and the prosecution.
Can you talk a little bit more about the bill that you mentioned earlier? Where does that stand, and how could that help?
Sure. There are 2 bills that are before the General Assembly today that we believe gives us greater authority to protect Marylanders. One is to give us the authority to go to court when we enter a facility, right, and we see that abuse and neglect is happening, violations of the patient Bill of Rights that Tammy outlined, right, the right to be free of chemical restraints. And today, if we see that, we don't have the ability to immediately stop that. We can't go to court and say to a judge, hey, this is what's going on. Here's the evidence that we have. We want an injunction against this person or this institution. We don't have that. When this bill passes, we will have that ability to go into court to ask the court to have it stop immediately. So that's one important one. The other that I alluded to, Tammy did as well, there is a resident Bill of Rights in nursing homes. Enumerated Bill of Rights, free from chemical restraints, dignity, respect. It doesn't apply today to assisted living facilities. And we know that more and more of our family members and neighbors and residents in Maryland, as we have an aging population, are looking to assisted living facilities, short of skilled nursing, to be able to provide for that assistance, that care that more and more Marylanders need. So we're going to the General Assembly and asking that that Bill of Rights for residents in nursing homes also apply in assisted living facilities, and that the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit has that same authority to seek the injunctive relief to protect our neighbors, our family members, our residents in assisted living facilities as we are able to do in nursing homes. So we're cautiously optimistic. There are a lot of, good advocates. AARP was testifying side by side with us, a number of other advocacy groups. The General Assembly understands that there's this problem. They understand the need to give us additional powers and authorities, so we're cautiously optimistic it'll be passed in the next few days.
I actually do have one more. What can be done to hold the institutions that employ the abusers accountable in a situation
wanna
such
speak
as
to
the
that?
video?
So I understand your question. You're asking about the facility rather than the individual.
Yeah, is there action that can be taken against the facility in a case like that?
Certainly. And there are both criminal and civil consequences to facilities that fail to provide an adequate level of care. If we find that the facility itself is, for instance, understaffing to such a degree that they are unable to provide care, that's neglect, right? And we can criminally charge a company. It doesn't have to be an individual. The result, you can't put a company in jail, but you do get a monetary fine. And once convicted of a crime like abuse or neglect, we report those convictions then to HHS. In the federal government, we report it to the state, and those entities are excluded from state and federally funded health care plans. Given the extent of involvement that Medicaid has in long-term care, being excluded from Medicaid is a major blow. So yes, facilities, if there's not that single individual like there were in these cases where you can sort of identify the thrower of the punch, the person on the video, but rather it's a systemic problem by a facility, there are criminal repercussions. There are also civil repercussions that we can take, again, just pulling back a lot of money because, financial disincentives are our best tool right now. And what the AG was talking about with injunctive relief is also aimed at facility-wide problems.
I just have one more myself. Do you have any data on a trend of this kind of crime? Is it trending upward? Is it about the same? I mean, year to year, the Attorney General, Mr.
I don't have a specific answer to that. I might direct you to the Office of Healthcare Quality, which would have better statistics. We sort of see our cases one at a time. We see the flow, but we've always had a significant flow of abuse and neglect complaints. So I can't stand here and tell you there's been an uptick because we view our cases as they come in one at a time. I would assume that the Office of Healthcare Quality, who has oversight of the state's long-term care program, could provide you with hard data.
I should add, though, and again, I always like to take this opportunity to thank the General Assembly and the governor. In the last session, 2023, for this current fiscal year that we're in, fiscal year 24, we did receive additional resources to expand the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit. It's a great deal for the state in that the federal government funds 75% of the operations, payroll and operations of the unit. So we were able to get a pretty significant expansion of the unit. We've brought in, additional people, investigators, attorneys, to do the work. Sadly, though, at this point, we could probably double the size of the Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit, and still there would be more work, more abuse in the community than the unit could handle. But I do want to point out that the General Assembly and the governor have allocate additional resources, appropriate additional resources to our unit and our effort.
I have a question. So are these convictions automatically reported to the state licensing agencies?
So we're required to report all of the convictions in our unit within 30 days. We report to HHS and the National Practitioners Database, and we also report to the State Health Program. So they are all made aware so that they can exclude those individuals.
Are you able to speak on if these convictions trigger automatic suspension, or are these licenses revoked for these caretakers?
So we do often, if we're dealing with a licensed provider, once we get a conviction, we will often advise the relevant licensing board of that conviction. But not all of the caretakers that we prosecute have a license, and in that case, there's not a lot you can do. As a term of probation, we ask that they be excluded from working with vulnerable adults for the term of probation, which is often 5 years. So there are steps that we can take to keep them away from these vulnerable populations. But in terms of licensing, when they are licensed, yes, but oftentimes they're not.
Is there any sort of counseling for the victims with mental or physical violence they take, as a result of beating or something like that?
It's a good question. I know that we have a victim advocate on staff in the Office of the Attorney General who does work with victims and direct them to resources, but there's nothing mandated. So there are certainly requirements for victim notification and to keep the victims and the victims' families apprised of what's going on in the case. But then our victim advocate can also step in and sort of guide them through the process.
Is there any advice you could give families when it comes to vetting facilities or caretakers for their loved one?
All right, so I would direct you to the CMS website where you can look up any facility in Maryland. They have a STARS rating system. There's an overall rating, and there are sub-ratings. Pay attention to those ratings, and pay attention to any discrepancy between the overall rating and the sub-ratings. Look at the disciplinary history. It's available on that website. It's you can look up is it Care Connect? You can just look up the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services in Nursing Homes. It'll pop up. That's the first place you go. All the data's there. It's not always immediately obvious, but click around. You will find the information that you need. OHCQ is a great resource. They are the oversight agency for the state, so any problems that a facility has had, they'll have records. Just do your due diligence on the front end.
Zach, what does CMS stand for?
The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It's a federal agency. I'm sure it's cms.gov. I'm just guessing.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank
Have a nice
you.
day. Thank you. Zach?
Mr. Church.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pepe, thank you.